All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in here. I just wanted to kind of bring you in about a mid project phase here. So right now, I'm actually working with a AM5 socket in installing a thermal right kind of tall heat sink air cooler. It's the thermal right thermal peer. It's called the Peerless Assassin 120, which conveniently comes with this monitor screen that I've got hooked up in the back. And one of the reasons you're seeing it apart right now, this is not a first install in case you haven't noticed. So I'm actually applying a bit more thermal paste in an even way to make sure we're getting better contacts and good surface area coverage, because I've noticed that we are seeing some noticeable heat spikes, and it's not under significant load when I'm observing this. So I suspect that might have something to do with the original thermal paste application and its even coverage. So this is not as surgical as it may look, but I'm just going to make sure that, and I've seen this done a number of ways, and there's opinions across the board on the you know proper means and methodology. Like some people do it X, some people blob it in the middle and hope it spreads out. I've seen kind of in a really effective way on some of our, I guess, fellow creator videos, especially from, I think, over in I guess, Southeast Asia. I think it was South Korea, who was actually putting a pretty good video out there where they they speeded up time lapse and everything. You see them, they dab it on dot dot dot, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so that we have little dabs. And then as you apply the cooler, the other side picks those up and spreads them out. So effectively, the little dabs, maybe the size of a pea or less, they spread out evenly, and you end up getting pretty good coverage that way. So I'm going to give that a try. So do one here, one here, one here. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's basically to be more than enough to give it the coverage that it's going to need. Let me set this aside for a second. Now, the second part of what I'm going after here is to just kind of do a brief, call it a cleanup effort. So I'm gonna go get a rag, because if you can't tell, there's a bit of overkill here on the bottom side or the top, depending on which way you put it, and this left or right side here. So I want to get more evenness and more contact area covered, and covered evenly too. So one moment, I'll wipe this off and I'll continue. And if anyone has any thoughts, I've heard of, I don't know a lot about the liquid metal methodology of providing, I guess it's probably a solid way to get, I guess you'd say, more permanence and more solidarity in your contact area, rather than paste, which has a tendency to dry and spread out and so forth. But I've always taken issue with the idea that you're putting a electrically conductive material between areas that you're not really wanting to electrify. So you're taking it from perhaps the chip where you want your you want your electrification. So you end up getting current through, say, here, or maybe surges and risks like that. I can't tell you the details of why and how that happens, but to me it scared me hearing about it. So I'm going to go ahead and see showing you the cleaned off surface here, so we don't have any of that overspill anymore. Fresh, ready to go. I'm not going to go through cleaning it with like isopropyl or anything like that. I'm just going to apply it here, make sure we get nice, good, even contact coverage. I'm going to go once this way just to kind of smooth it in a bit and make sure the way I've done it's going to be effective. And just from looking at it here, you can tell that on the chip it definitely will smooth it out just fine. Looks like it's a bit more to the south or the north side, whichever way you're looking at it. So when I put it on this way, we should have it nice and even between these two surface areas here, and then get that coverage we desired from the get-go. So I'm going to position it in place here. So again, it's got the, I've already installed these previously, so I didn't film this. It's not terribly exciting. Basically on the back of the AM4 and AM5 too, you have a 4-point connector which contains the female side of the threading. So what that offers is these little adapters that come with the cooling, and you put these in, and then basically that gives you the screw hole alignment for, I guess, the sellers of these, like Thermalright and others, Peerless Assassin again here, to adapt to multiple CPUs. So this particular model here, the Peerless Assassin 120, is good for LGA, Intel chips, and also the AM4 and AM5. And so you might even notice here this mention of, you can see AM4 if I'm showing you here. And matter of fact, this is actually bolting into an AM5. But when you look at what goes on the AM5, it's the same layout. So, and when I bolt these down, and much like you would do, you know, with a car lug nut pattern, they do the star pattern. Just go back and forth, kind of evenly apply pressure. As you start to feel it tighten up, the other side will raise a little bit. So just kind of do a few turns on each side, feel it evenly coming down. Eventually, as it maxes out the spring, it goes through the entire travel area of the spring. You'll see it. Basically, you'll be turning the screw. It doesn't take a whole lot of your wrist here, but then all of a sudden you'll hit the end and you'll know it. It's you don't want to try to torque through that either. When you feel that thing stop, you let it stop. You're like, right here, if I went ahead and gave it a good solid crank, I'd well, a number of things could happen. I could end up causing damage to the board. I could end up yanking one side out. There's plenty of reason they do it this way. So nice and snug, but you definitely don't want to put your elbow grease into it. So if there's any other folks that have worked on both cars and you know, tower computers for gaming and workstation systems, and I'm not sure it's a background shared by everybody, but you might have a tendency to want to give it that, you know, car crank when really there's nothing in here that needs that sort of elbow grease. So that's on, that's snug. I'm confident in its fitment. And right here, I'll just show you, it's the RAM installed is actually a crucial. It came with a 2-stick set, but right now I'm trying to spread this among systems, so I'm using the other stick. This is actually a 64 gigabyte DDR5 5200 megatransfer stick. So shoot, when I bought it, just so you know, I'm not a wealthy guy or anything. This was actually a very cheap set. It was a 128 gigabyte set. Now, if you wanted to get this, you're looking north of $1,000, depending on where you're shopping and when. At the date of this video, which is 28th of January of 2026. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and there's a fan that goes in the middle here. Basically, the way I've got the fan set up right now is we have air exhausting out the front, intake at the top. That may be counterintuitive. Different people say, well, you want the air coming in this way. I've tried it either. Maybe I'll try it, switch the fans around, see how it performs. But right now I've got these massive ProArt. I haven't measured them, but they look to be about, oh, I don't know, maybe 240 millimeters. Some of their huge fans in the front. They're a dual fan set. You can see them all the way across here. It's only 2 of them covering the entire case. And then at top, there's 3 of the 140 millimeters, and in front is a single 140 millimeters. So there are no 120s in this entire case. Again, the ProArt 2.0. Excellent case. I love the thing. And I'm glad I'm still able to make use of it. So I have a choice, right? So I have this fan here that does not have any RGB. So I figured, well, what better place than right between the 2 heat sinks? And I'd always check, in case you're curious, the fan, if you see the guard side or the protected side versus the exposed side, the way the fans are set up, if you're not sure if you're following the flow, which is usually written on the fan, see right here. But if you're not sure, you can always, if they rub that off completely, you know that you can follow this direction here. It flows from the open side to the covered side. So we know this fan here is going to have air coming in this way and out this way. So to follow a consistency of airflow within the system, I'm going to set this up to, of course, match the same direction, because we don't want competing airflows, and that creates all kinds of turbulence and perhaps even cavitation in the system. So, and no one likes a lot of noise, and you want your system nice and cool. So there we go. Got this middle fan in, very, very little trouble there. I'm going to hook this to the main CPU connector here. A little 4-pin header. And most often, I'd say on every board I've worked with, the CPU fan connection has always been at top. And so, a bit of a strange angle here. I was hoping I could get it from over here without messing too much, but there we go. So that's installed, that's hooked up, and be careful too, you don't want your wire. And of course, I'm going to run some good cable management on here after I get everything hooked up. But keep your wires nice, and you don't want them too snug, but you also don't want them dangling everywhere to where you could catch a wire in a fan. You know, those, they can slowly move too. So with, you know, thermal expansion, everything else, they're just settling with gravity as I tilt this up vertically. Say I had a wire hanging a certain way and a fan over here, the wire could slowly start drifting into the path of the fan. So you don't want to have that caught. So you're leaving your system out of your sight for a little bit and it's just running. You don't want to cause that damage. And here, see, same flow path, covered side, just like this here, you can see. So that way we have solid flow and we have two fans pushing it as well. And this one here being already hooked up, let me move this out of the way for a moment. And this goes right over the top. But again, the cable management here I'm not too concerned about because, you know, the main thing is I want to see how it performs if it runs a bit cooler. And with this too, this is another thing, if there's a science to it, by all means tell me. I'd love to hear it in the comments. But basically, when I'm hooking this onto the heat sink different fins, I'm not going to try to count the fins and make sure I'm exactly, say, 2, 3, or 14, whatever from the top. I just like to line it up nice and smooth, but leaving room to when I put the monitor on the front. And this monitor is very convenient too. You can look right in your system once you download the software, and you can see your GPU temperature. You can even set it up when you're in the app to configure it to show you different modules too. But the default setting shows you the CPU temp and the GPU temp at VRAM, I believe. And you can actually set it up to show you the GPU temp at the hotspot too. And I think that's especially convenient because that's not a metric that's really available until you start digging around in software like HW Info. And if you saw how that hooked on, there is no trouble whatsoever. It's magnetic, and I set it down, and these holes are perfectly designed. You see these two magnets here, two magnets there. It's 4, and here's of course, the opposing polarity. And you set it there, and like it grabs onto it, so I could probably tilt this thing upside down and shake it, and it wouldn't go anywhere. So now that I've got everything plugged in, I've got no concerning interference. I'm confident with the torque that I've tightened it down with. I'm looking for a heat sink here. Definitely something I have in the cards for a later date. This here is in fact one thing I would like to try to get back on. I've just had some issue with the way this, and this is what came with it, by the way this hooks into the board. So I can give it another try now that I've got a little more angle on it, see what precisely I'm running into here. See, as I can tell, when I put the NVMe, put it down, there's a little contact connector here, and it spins to grab your SSD. And so looks like I might have it down here, so I can try this one more time. I just hate to give up on this one. I'm looking right at it. Yeah, I also don't want to put a bunch of pressure on it and then damage it either. So see, I can hear it trying to snap into place. I'm just not seeing what mechanism is. If you look closely here, there's a little hole that should hook it in. There's also a machined out, maybe about 2-3 mils deep, and it's shaped as if you could guide it in this way. So I've looked at it, the way that these two in the front, there's two protruding contact points that look like they would, almost like a Phillips head hanging a cord on the wall, like one of those surge protector, similar kind of thing. It's wide at the top with a narrow set. So I was thinking you could go like this. Unfortunately, this here would require you basically go the other direction. So one last thing I just saw, and I might give it a try, is I might try to get the back first. That could be the answer. And I'm sure something is, because obviously this came with it. It's not a... Yeah, I'm just not too sure what the deal is and why it's really not wanting to connect here. And again, I don't like to put too much pressure on this stuff because I do not know at what point it's going to say, well, that's enough for me, and give out. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a installed Thermal Right Peerless Assassin 120 with proper thermal paste applied to it. So we should get solid heat transfer from the CPU up through the fins, and of course let the fans blow it through following the airflow path. One thing I did notice though is I do want to switch around the fans either here or this configuration here, because basically what I'm looking at is that's a lot of flow this way. I mean, we have two something millimeter fans in the front. They came with the Pro Art case, and so if I look at that, it's like 200 mil fans. I mean, these are massive. I can show you how to spin it around. And then over here, we have this one single 140 millimeter. So I'm thinking maybe shifting the flow path with this here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and do it because it just plain makes sense. And also I've taken a moment to install some screening, because this case was once, as I mentioned, a part of my home server, Threadripper 5955 WX system on the, well, may she rest in peace, the Creator 2 motherboard. And so it was in the garage. When it was in the garage or my shop, or we can call it whatever we want, it was certainly not getting the same amount of clean air flowing through as it was a bit more dusty air, as you'd imagine, from not only the outdoors and whatever Mother Nature blows through, but also I do a little work out there quite a bit actually. So you got kick up dust from not only some aging tools, but your occasional blast of sawdust. And here, I don't think the screen is necessary, and I don't know who agrees with me that using these screens is a good idea, but you have to remember too that there's more to it than simply blocking out the dust from coming in the system. You also have to consider that these screens do impede a pretty significant amount of your airflow potential. And so where you might normally have, say, these maybe 4 or 5 mil wide holes, which basically create this honeycomb effect, you're sacrificing a bit of that with these screens. And so I think that's another thing we might see as an improvement when I make this change here and remove this screen. And I'm not trying to indict this particular product. This is actually, you can tell just by looking at it, and even inside, because I did not install this until I moved this inside. This was from the outside. It does pretty well. It's caught a bit of dust even in here. So again, at this point, I have competing interests, and my interest to see the CPU run at a more stable and low temperature definitely stands above my interest to catch this bit of dust. So I'm going to pull this out for now, and we're going to go ahead and do the second part of it, which is where I'm going to take this fan. Let's see how much slack we have here. And there we go. Now we reverse this flow direction. Of course, I'm going to follow that up with the top fans, reversing those as well, so they take up the purpose of exhaust. Now we'll go ahead and connect it back in. And I'm a huge fan of these, just generally these fan screws, just because it doesn't require all that many turns to get them on. They're nice and easy, and if you can actually, when you have it on the top, you have to leave them in place. And as you screw them, they kind of catch whatever they touch. So they do a good job at catching the fan slots. All right. I don't know if you saw the power supply I've got in here. One thing I've always been a fan of is the old saying, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So if you're not sure if you're going to use the same amount of or same system for a long period, if you want to plan for future proofing, or basically if you're thinking, well, you never know, maybe the 5090 eventually might come down underneath $6,000 or whatever it is now, you might want to have that overhead in wattage, so that way you could run a more powerful graphics card. It gives you room to other things in your system too. So you're able to run you can run two graphics cards as well, and you're not going to be concerned about hitting those electrical limits of a, say, 750 watt power supply. And it doesn't hurt it to have 1200 watts at its disposal. It's not as if the 1200 watt is going to just purge the system and blow the lid off of it with its extra power availability. It's just basically considered standby in the case you need it. And now we got this fan in place. So while I've got it in we'll call it the horizontal, I'm going to go ahead and reattach our graphics card. And just to give you a little background on this, and this was a pretty exciting one because I've always been following the game that NVIDIA was playing, but I decided, take a departure from that and see what AMD's got going on. So right here, now let's put it up for a sec. This is actually the AMD Radeon RX 7900 XT. So this is actually I would argue it's a 3-slot card. They probably fit 2.5. Either way, you're blocking that third slot. So it's also 20 gigabytes of VRAM. And so that is enough. I mean, it's up there with the best. And for those of you who are following the current NVIDIA 16 gigabyte scarcity, even for the 5070 Ti and 5060 Ti, which I've got one in a system right there, this is kind of one of those overlooked and very powerful graphics cards out there. And I've run FPS frames per second tests on Furmark, and I've seen this card perform on par with the 5070 Ti, which is really not all that south of the 5080. So I don't know if anyone else has had that experience or worked with this card, or it's a slightly bigger cousin, the 7900 XTX, which is a 24 gigabyte card. But this was an excellent price. This was actually only $649 on Amazon when I found it. And so I'll put a link to that too, in case anyone else wants to take the AMD switch with all the excitement of late NVIDIA has been putting out and coverage I've seen. I'm starting to look more into them too. So there's another thing. I'm sure there's opinions all over the place on how to do this. I like to kind of cautiously lower the card in, make sure everything's aligned. And when you put it in there, basically lining up the PCIe slot, so the back kind of comes in first. Make sure that your back end bracket falls in this little sliver of space between where originally you'd have your cover plates going and the motherboard itself. So it leaves just enough room for it to, and you'll know if it fits right. So you hear that snap, that means you got a good lock and good placement. So right now this card's firmly in. So from here I'm going to go ahead and put the hold down screws to keep it in place. And I'm sure no matter whether this is your first time building a computer, changing a graphics card, or if you're a known professional, I'll wager every one of you has amassed some form of the equivalent of the middle-aged drawer in the kitchen worth of hardware. So this is what this is becoming. So I'm trying to use this before I go into this, which is an organized kit I bought, a 502-piece kit that has all your computer component needs. So that's actually very useful, especially for the price. It doesn't cost all that much. These are maybe $5 or $10 at most. And they pretty much last the long haul. The one thing I do wish they'd have come with more of is the fan screws, which you do consume pretty quickly, but in fairness, when you get fans, they are very liberal and generous with giving you their screws. So let's see, I've got one here I can use. And just for the aesthetic purposes, I do try to match the screws the best I can. So trying to do hodgepodge, switching off the chrome or the stainless every other one with a black coated one, so that way you at least get that uniformity in appearance. And it looks like we may have to go into, oh, here it is. No, we have enough. And this is unfortunately not my magnetic, so let me see if I can use that so I don't drop a screw in here and then create a 10-year case rattle. There we go. And the cool thing about this screwdriver, if you've ever bought or used one of these kits that are kind of made for this purpose, you can actually spin the middle part of it in the where you grip it in the handle. If I can illustrate this best, let me get this screw going first so I don't again end up with that pesky rattle. If you'll see where my hand is, I can put my palm as kind of a bracing element against the back whilst using my thumb and my middle finger or index or both to spin the middle as if it's like a rolling pin. And so I'm spinning the middle right now, and I can have excellent control over the direction it goes, and I'm not having to just twist the whole thing by wrist. And then when you're done, you want to get a little more torque, not too much, but you can grab the whole thing and twist it together. But this part here spins freely, and I think that's one of the unspoken yet highly convenient parts of this little contraption screwdriver they included in the kit. So now we've got this hooked up. This is in solid. I can move this back closed, and this being one of those, I don't know how useful you could argue it is, that covers the screws here. So probably more likely useful for a vertical install. And then now that I've got this here, I'm going to pop these other two cover plates in there. Or what do you think? Another graphics card? Cover plates or another card? You convinced me. I'm going to do another card. So rather than just putting little cover plates over it, well, there's also door B, option 2, whatever you want to call it. I can breathe another day's life into this old server card. I've already made a few videos about the surprising ability to get this card to perform. And that would be none other. Oh, let me see if I can build up to it and show you at the same time. There we go. Pulling a server fan here. None other than a 2016-2017 masterpiece, which is on the Vega architecture, the Radeon Instinct Mi60. Of course, when you put it into, say, GPU-Z, the system may identify it as the Radeon 50, Mi50, but the bottom line is the VRAM available on this, let's call it rather classic, a bit nostalgic of server GPUs. And if you ever look up a video on one of these, and you look at the ones that are maybe 7, 8 years old, you'll see, a fellow on a very fancy stage holding this up like it's, the wave of the future and talking about the thousands and thousands of dollars it would cost to get it. Whereas now you can pick one of these up on Amazon for, I think I got this for $299.99, something like that. Throw tax on top of that, you're still south of $350 or $400. So depending on your taxing jurisdiction. So I'm going to pop this one in as well. And the cool thing is this board, I would have to tell you and look into it to give you the proper number of PCIe lanes, but I do believe it's 24. And that's sufficient for both the primary and a secondary card to get the required bandwidth to perform. And the other good thing about this passive cooled GPU is the two slot occupation, and well, the other thing is it would have a rear vent server fan, so I don't have that. But what I do have is a 60 millimeter fan that I actually pulled off of the first cooling I was using on my Threadripper system, which was a server cooler, which is a much lower profile before I put my preferred method of cooling on here. And it does not look pretty, but it's got some power. And this little fan, of course, the other thing that comes with that is you have to listen to the whine of a server fan when you're trying to get your system up and running, or if you're just sitting there and wondering what that god awful sound is, well, that's probably that fan. All right. And this particular hole here, I apparently have changed so many cards out in this poor tower when I was doing various experiments when I had the Threadripper in here. Some of these holes are fairly well bored out, so the traditional connection screws are actually, unfortunately, a little bit loose in the system, so I have to find a slightly wider diameter screw. Thread gauge doesn't really make a difference, but this screw here actually works. You can hear it slides in some, but it does at least make a connection point. But either way, I'm giving it a good jiggle, not too much, but you can see it's in there. I'm not concerned about it. So now we hook everything back up. Let me pull this back out of the way, and then we'll get to the reversing the fans on the top. Don't want to forget that. So this is something, I'm kind of showing you everything in one video. So this is actually a contraption, or call it what you want, but it's a wiring harness that I got on Amazon. I get everything on Amazon. So this actually does quite the reverse of what you might be typically seeing in terms of the 12 VHPR PWRs, and this takes the 12 volt, or the 600 watt, and it does the reverse of what you would normally see, which is taking the two PCIe 8 pins and merging them into this 600 watt output. Well, this takes the reverse, so that's all you have coming out of your power supply. So I actually have a generous number of these, and the PCIe not so much. So this little $4, $5 wiring setup allows me to use this as a dual 8 pin. And there's no concern I have over the amount of wattage either, because obviously it's going the other direction, right? So now I've got two 8 pins with plenty of power feeding it. So I'm going to go ahead and hook these up, and make sure when you do this you keep an eye on where that 6 to 8 pin loose connector that you see kind of folded around here. Sometimes these can come loose, you don't get a good contact, so make sure if it's a slide through the top, lock, and bottom, that you come in and this is not either loose this way, or worse, it could actually be behind the little you call them the slots that slides into, and then you won't get 2-pin connection out of all. You'll be getting 6 instead of 8. All right, so that's good. You got a snap. Same here, see? Snap it in place. All right. Now, for the connection of power to the Radeon Instinct Mi60, it's a bit unique because this takes one 8-pin and one 6. At the time, I think the 6-pin was far more popular, so this is where you have to be cautious to make sure you do the proper connectors here. Don't try to, and some people might try anyway, to cut a piece off here, or there's all sorts. You wouldn't believe what you'd see out there trying to maximize the use of these relatively inexpensive cables, and mixing and matching between power supplies. I try to stick to the rule where if it's the cables that came with it, then I'd just as soon use them with that power supply. Now, there of course are cables you can buy on the aftermarket that can extend and make easier the connection points by, and also aesthetics too. You see some ones like Asia Horse makes a pretty good set. But here we go. We got 14 pins hooked up here, 16 here, and this is one heck of an AMD system now. So all told, what do we have? 32 with 48 gigabytes of VRAM. Of course, exposing this is a bit more difficult. Everyone says you have to do it in Linux, but you can check out my other video. I can show you that there are ways around that, and it does involve looking to the ends of the earth to get your Vulkan APIs and everything else, and especially when you get Rock M going. So, all right, now I'm going to very cautiously pick this up, and I should put the cover on now. Hey, do me a favor, like this video if you've ever broken a case cover before. I never have, of course, ever, and never would. I promise that. Okay. Buttoned up nice. Now, of course, is where you might get excited, say, I want to test those thermals, hook it up, and don't forget, we switched this fan here. So now the fan direction is intake. So we have to make sure we exhaust through the top. That way we have intakes here, intake here, and then 140 and exhaust. That evens out the flow of air in and out of the system. Before, it was quite uneven with, intake top, exhaust here. So it was not quite as much balance to intake and exhaust. So this is a heavy one too. So folks, don't be ashamed if, well, I better not say anything too soon. All right, there we go. And I'll have to show you guys sometime how I made this little lazy Susan looking table. You wouldn't believe where it came from, but well, there, I'll give you the secret. It came from an old chair. A little woodworking, a few screws, and there you go. All right, so here we go. We're going to take these fans, and I'm thinking switch 2. If I switch 3, well, let's do this. So the 2 just above the CPU heatsink, and where cooling really is needed most, I would say these 100%, I want to be able to exhaust the air up because we have intake. This I think I'm going to have to do as well, because if I have a fan blowing downward, these 2 blowing upward, the intake air from the large 220 millimeter coming in the front, then if I didn't exhaust all 3 of these, I would create a bit of turbulence and cavitation between these 2 here. So I'm going to go ahead and just do it right. And of course, right is a subjective term. I prematurely put that front cover on, didn't I? Who else is the back pocketer of screwdrivers as they're working? I know everyone's hand went up on that one because that's what you do. Anyone who has the patience to put their screwdriver in its slot every time they move something, boy, their patience is admirable. And the reason, just so you know, I had to take the front back off is I need to have a hand underneath to make sure I'm not dropping the fan and digging up digging up the cooler, or also the stick of DDR5 crucial 64 gigabyte, which by today's standard I may as well just be, throwing hundreds in the fire. That's a pretty valuable piece of hardware right there. Okay. So I'm going to try to get 3. Now, one of the other habits I used to have was when you pull the screws out, you sometimes feel like, well, I don't want to move from what I'm doing, so I'm going to back pocket them. Just get in that habit. Don't lose that object permanence. Make sure you remember where you put them. Otherwise, your wife or you, whomever, is going to go to the washing machine, the dryer, you're going to hear a bunch of jangles, and then you get them back out, and it's like, oh, look what I found. Oh, of course, there's the screws. All right. Although I am going to cheat and put these in the back pocket. Don't tell her, she's going to be editing. Oh, shoot, she's going to see this in editing, isn't she? Well, that's good then. At least she sees them in editing. She will know if missing screws will likely turn up in the dryer, as long as we edit it pretty soon after we make it. I don't think I did anything here that needs to be edited out, do you? All right. I want to make sure I can go ahead and fix the cables up how I'd like them to while I'm in here. Now, I'm not going to do the full cable. We'll do that for another video, but I just want to make sure I've got them as I take these fans and flip them. The main thing, and the way I hold them is I come around the front. Just make sure you got a finger kind of like that. Hold the two corners because it's going to try to fall. And it's not like you're dropping a lead weight or anything, but it's less messy to let it down easy, and you don't want it falling out the front. So looks like fortunately here I did not leave it much slack anyway, so that'll make my work just a little bit easier. All right, let's see what we have. We have a little bit of slack here. So I'm going to try to pull this through the front, flip the direction, and then by the same connection wires for both RGB and, actually this is a good time, trying to bite off more than I can chew here, but a good time to pull this CPU connector and maybe run it a different way. So that way we're not bumping the CPU connector wire up against the fan intake. Especially when it's the intake side, because you don't think about it much that way, but it's like the front side of any other fan, a jet or whatever. It will certainly try to suck things in. You crank these up full and it will do that with that much more force, and a nearby not so heavy CPU fan wire might just easily get sucked in. Or at minimum, it'll get sucked close enough to give you that nasty sound of, oh, what's going on? And there it is, a cable running into a fan. And I mainly just want to get one screw in here for now, just to keep it in place as I take a look at this and see what we want to maybe do a little bit different. All right, these cables are clear. So it's really this one here. I don't think I've got quite enough slack to run this all the way down, but I'm still going to leave it off until I'm sure of how these fans are going to interact. So, and I left one in here too, so that way I can, same thing, just kind of take it down a little bit easy. There we go. We don't have to ding anything up. And again, with these fan screws, I was saying, I do like the wider thread gauge, because you can effectively, after I switch it around, I don't have to take the screw all the way out. The screw in place, of course, it's not going anywhere. I'm going to be using a different screw, so the only thing I'm going to do differently is pull these wires through the back from the corner, so it's that much less exposed connection wire in the, say we'll call it the pretty side. How about that? And we get one screw in here as well. And see that there's no real need to put much upward force on it to get it to connect and start drawing it in. Because of that, I get that wide thread gauge. I've actually heard, I don't know who the manufacturer is, but there's a case manufacturer that's got a pretty wild-eyed new idea where they've got, I think it might be Leon Lee, in fact, but don't quote me on that, that does a set of case fan screws that only take 2 turns. So imagine widening that thread gauge to where it's basically, probably looks much like a corkscrew. That's all it takes. I'm going to get this one in too, because now I'm comfortable with this setup. And now a little more elbow grease here is okay, but again, there's no need to get your torque wrench out. All right, so now we've got the exhaust flow configured. And I'm going to take one of my back pocket screws, and I better make sure I use all of these. See, without even putting upward pressure, this actually caught the, I really like this thread gauge. Really hard. I'm not really promoting fan screws. I think they're, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another, except for that one I came across. All right. And yeah, there's a power tool for this. The thing is the amount of torque I need here. The little, call it the mini motorized screwdriver, it would pretty much conk out on the second turn. So again, that's because that's not the design. The design is not to necessarily torque in fan screws, but it'll do more delicate work, like say tighten down the NVMe threaded female ends that go to the board themselves. You have these little tiny screws about the size of a fingernail in width, and it's also good for the motherboard screws themselves. It doesn't spin too fast. And I wish I could tell you more about this brand of fan. The thing is, I had a couple of fans go through here as I was looking to maximize both the RGB effect and for my now outdoor server, which runs the Threadripper system, it does not actually have any RGB headers. And this works just fine too. Again, one of my favorites here. This is just a little bit narrower, so a little harder on your wrist, but depending on the age group of folks here watching, uh, arthritis isn't a thing for me yet, but I imagine I'm not too far off. And we'll go to flip the last one, and that way we've done it right and we've not done it quick. I'm going to loosen this up a smidge, give it some more height. I get the screw to, this is a convenient light too. I originally got this for the purpose of making these videos, which I'm doing here, but this turns out to be quite the useful hobby light and puts it right where you need it. All right, so we got 1, 2. I guess this is my last chance if I want to create turbulence, but I think I'm going to go with the original plan to flip these around. All right, back pocket. Last one, I promise. Oh, well, no, I don't promise. There's 3 more. And the order you do these, as far as this is a little bit different. I don't think it matters personally. I think as long as you follow a pattern that is least likely to drop a fan on something valuable, then you've done something right. And same thing with taking them out and putting them in. When you put them in, maybe you put in the one, I'm going to give it a little support here, the one that is most likely to keep it stable, close to its final position, and not somewhere where it's going to fall or interfere with anything. All right. Ooh, see, that's why you keep a hand there. Again, not the end of the world if it did fall. I'm sure that's not the first that it happened to anybody, but... And here we go. I'm going to go ahead and make sure we have taut wires pulled through. Taut in the relative sense. I would rather say clean. And here we go. Get this one started while it's in here. So yeah, it's always nice to get these in the direction you want them to flow to begin with, but if you're testing out different flow configurations and airflow patterns, say, I don't know, maybe perhaps you're near the exhaust side of an air conditioner, the say the cold side, and you can stick your computer to where your tower can do its intake air right where the blast is coming out of your air conditioning vent. I'm not a thermodynamics expert, but I suspect that 60-degree or less air, which is actually supposed to be about 50 when it's coming out of an air conditioner, is going to cool your system a lot better than the ambient air elsewhere. So there's little things like that you can just kind of intuitively consider when looking at things like this. So I'm not really terribly concerned about that, although I do have, for the summer months in this office, which gets fairly hot, a window unit there. So if I were to set this system over here, I would be actually quite happy with this setup, because I could put these massive fans right up against the cold side of the air conditioner and be sucking it right through the front. And there we go. Now, All the screws in place, all the same direction. So if that's the case, we can begin to button it back up. Now I'm going to make sure nothing came loose back here. It's good to do a once over because it's not uncommon that you do see that. And here, let me make sure. No, but I do have one that I need to cover. I may as well do that while I'm in here. So it's actually one of the RGB 3-pin that I had originally set up to plug into the female side of another, but I don't want to leave the prongs exposed. This is just a cover that goes over those, and there you go. Now, I will show you the cable management with the, I guess I'm going to lay it out there up front. It's not done, but I will show you that it's manageable for us to take a look at the performance, and then, now that we're happy with everything. See, this here, that's why you do the once over, right? This was actually the CPU fan, which still needs to be connected. A little bit of a hard time, so I guess what I'll do is get the backside ready, but I will do you one quick look. Okay, that's it. Okay, wow, look at how nice that is. Man, that's, boy, I wish I could show you more. I just, we're going to run out of time, or whatever the excuse might be. No, but we will look at that again. And I'm sure for those of you paying enough attention, you probably saw why. Now I'm going to pull it back on its side just for a moment. Oh, man. All right, I don't have a counterbalance or a scale here to weigh this, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably a good 40, maybe 45 pounds. So, when you get ready to move these around, pick them up, do what you got to do, then, keep that in mind. You might be a while before you move your system again. You kind of move in smaller towers and things. You're like, oh, well, I got this. Whoa, drop it. All right, so we get this fan header for the CPU fan hooked in. I'm actually glad it is solid like that. The alternative would be loose fitment. Now, in order to keep it out of the way of the fan's exhausting from the top, I am going to butt it underneath this connector bracket, which isn't going to hurt anything, and it will keep it nice and clean of the newly directioned intake from this side fans or exhaust fans. So, nice, clean. I don't see anything unplugged or needing any more attention here. Mind you, this I actually had plugged in to begin with. You might have noticed these skips here, but that's not skipping anything. They were never actually taken out. So I'm going to pop the front case back on, front case cover. That still has the old stickers from the ASRock Creator 2 WRX80 board and Red River Pro, but that is highly misleading now because it's running, well, not too highly. I think the CPU in here does just fine, but it's running the AMD AM5 socket for the Ryzen 7 7700X, which is no slouch. And here we go. And I'm moving it over here. And if you have the patience, and I have the microphone, we may go ahead and fire it up now. See how she does. All I ask for is no judgment about my desk. It's a creator's workspace, or whatever you want to call it, is one of those things that I like to call it part of the art. If that doesn't work, I'll think of another excuse why not to organize the desk. All right. Now, I did have the foresight to keep all the connections still together, so I can hook this up pretty easily. And speakers. Alrighty. All hooked back up in the back. Power, monitors, mouse. Might be worth looking into. It's a lot easier than walking around with a jug of Windex. Okay, so I'm going to back it up just a little, but I still want to have visibility on the Thermalright Peerless screen because that's where we're going to gauge the performance. And I mean, how cool it will stay. So I'm going to go ahead and power it on. A little Radeon does a little flash. I suppose that it's saying something like, I'm ready to go. All right. It's alive. It's green. That means all the RGB is hooked up properly. No lost fan connectors, headers, anything like that off. So it looks like this boot's pretty quick. I'm used to this Threadripper system that takes about a minute and a half to get through boot time, and that's on fast boot. Here we go. All right, now I'm going to take the camera in my hands for this so I can show you, number one, how you get your values, and number two, I can tell you this, I wish I would have done it before or after. This is Fahrenheit, by the way, before anyone freaks out and thinks this thing's well over the boiling point of water. So that just being from Texas, as much as I've had to learn Celsius, I'm just doing my best to not forget Fahrenheit. So if you don't mind. And maybe someone else maybe a few listening right now might also agree that a Fahrenheit temperature view just kind of rings better if you were raised on that. Although it can be scarier for Celsius. Now, here's how you get the Peerless Assassin going. Again, I do beg you for your understanding of the artistic value of the way I have this. So I'm going to sit behind here, and this TRCCS, basically the Thermal Assassin, Peerless, and you can look this up too. So say I went to the screen here and Thermalright. You basically look this up. There you go. English, well, that's for me anyway. And then you go look for the applications, support download. It's going to be under download. And English. Again, if Mandarin Chinese or whichever might be your language, then of course you would not download the English unless you're just trying to learn English by way of the Thermalright Assassin, which is a lovely benefit they do offer as a multilingual interface. Now I'm doing this more for the illustration of getting access to the application itself. I already have it installed, so once you get it here, you have the setup.exe. So I take it this way, extract all, extract, and there it goes. meanwhile, we can take a look at the temperatures here. And I'm actually very pleased. I have not seen it even touching 150 just yet. And before I had just done what you saw me do, it was hitting 150 pretty much near idle. So I can definitely say now that that had something to do with the um, thermal paste contact and in all likelihood the configuration of the fans and the airflow path. So I'm actually very glad to see this, because now I'm not all that concerned that I can even run Cinebench and other benchmarks for the CPU uh, and not be so concerned. So I didn't mean to keep that. It's been sitting here ready to set up. So double click setup, and it might still let me do it even though I already have the app. So you download it, your internet speed will tell you how fast that'll go, and so will your computer. So let's just say that's done. Then yes, assuming you're in agreement. And there it goes. And now you have your temperature in Celsius because it went back to the factory configuration. So there it is, running at about 30, about a third throughput without any issue from CPU overheat or thermal throttling or anything like that. So I suppose at this point the only logical thing I can do is see if I can get this thing fired up. And whoever's familiar with Ryzen Master, obviously if you're Intel, that's not your bird of choice. Actually, I got a better idea. How about a pass mark run? All right. So there's the CPU. I love this app too. We're getting 3,136. That's another thing I'll show you too, is the frame rate of this GPU. But this has been an hour long, so we'll cut back in. Thank you. And I appreciate you tuning in. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and please comment.